That sounds good. Okay. And
Mhm,
I put together a land acknowledgement,
mhm.
um, kind of with the idea of nuclear weapons in mind, although you may not pick that up. We live and work on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people. We seek to nurture our relationship with our Coast Salish neighbors and to protect and care for this place, their homelands, where we mutually abide. So, Sean, you want to take it from here?
Sure. Um, well, yeah, thank you all for having me. I see a lot of familiar faces here, but certainly don't know everyone. Um, my name's Sean Arendt. I am the Nuclear Weapons Abolition Program Manager for the Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility. And in that role, I coordinate the Washington Against Nuclear Weapons Coalition. I believe I'm here because we have a really exciting event that is just about a month away. Um, on April 11th and 12th at Seattle First Baptist Church, we are hosting a 2-day conference really designed to rebuild and regalvanize the grassroots anti-nuclear weapons movement. The reason we're doing this, obviously, is because it's morally right. Nuclear weapons are a terror on this earth. But what I would want to underscore more than anything is that the nuclear arsenals of the world are changing. They're being rebuilt, they're being modernized, and we're entering a situation where we don't have the same level of great power intercommunication. Treaties between these nuclear powers have been vastly eroded. We know that the nuclear powers are also modernizing their nuclear testing sites. So this is information that we desperately need to get out to the public. So the idea behind this conference is really to get as many people and organizations in the room as we can, um, have them hear from the experts about what's happening, and then on day two, decide what strategies we're going to use to rebuild this movement. What are the campaigns we're going to take on? That'll be a discussion for conference attendees to participate in, to talk amongst themselves, and ultimately to vote on. In a way, this is kind of a refounding conference of the Washington Against Nuclear Weapons Coalition. Um, this will be the first time in probably since the founding of the organization that a majority of our coalition partners are going to be together in one place. So that alone is really exciting to me. Um, so we've confirmed some keynote speakers. Um, the first who was beating down our door about this is uh, Dr. Ira Helfand. Dr. Ira Helfand is one of the co-founders of Physicians for Social Responsibility and the IPPNW, or the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. He's also a leader on the Back from the Brink organization, a leader in Rotary and many other spaces, and is very widely acclaimed as a major expert in this work. And he was the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, I believe, in 2017 on behalf of the IPPNW. So major force, major voice in this work, and we're excited to have him. The second speaker we confirmed is named Dr. Lee Tai-jae. Dr. Lee is a second generation Korean Hibakusha. So his parents were in Hiroshima um, when the A bomb was dropped. Um, and as a result, their DNA was damaged, and that DNA was passed down to him.
Mhm.
as a second generation Hibakusha. He's had several health issues, cancers, um, and really, illustrates that um, the things that happen, when a nuclear bomb goes off, when radiation is released into the environment and affects people, it is a multi-generational harm that's being done. In addition, the voice of the Korean Hibakusha, the Koreans that were in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, has long been overlooked. So we're really glad to have him there, um, and to share his story and um, advocate for recognition for the Korean Hibakusha community.
Mhm.
The third keynote speaker we've confirmed is Lily Adams. Lily Adams was the first person to hold my role at WPSR, and was basically one of the founding members of the W&W Coalition. She currently works for the Union of Concerned Scientists, and in that role, she coordinates the coalition to pass the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. So we're excited that Lily will be returning to us to tell us all about what she's been up to, and um, I know many of you would have met her over the years as well. And lastly, I believe we have Ivana Hughes with the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, um, who has done a lot of work bringing up next generation leaders from the Marshall Islands and other nuclear impacted communities to advocate for the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. So we're very excited about this. We may also have an appearance by Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. Um, we have several panels that are being organized. One which that I'm really excited for will be about impacted communities. We have a speaker coming from the Wanapum people, the people who originally lived on the Hanford site, a speaker from the Spokane Nation, a speaker from the Marshall Islands, um, Jim Thomas, who many of you would know. He's a Hanford downwinder. And I think it's going to be a really excellent uh, uh, panel for folks. And then we're going to have two workshop sessions, which we will break out into, and people will go and learn about different topics like youth organizing, or what it's like for college professors who teach nuclear weapons in the classroom. There'll be a panel of authors. So we hope there will be really something in this for everyone. So here's the organizations that have endorsed the conference so far, as well as organizations that have sponsored. So you've got the usual suspects like Ground Zero, like the Fellowship of Reconciliation, like Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility. But we've also got some new folks involved, like the Seattle Evergreen Korean Coalition, like the Partnership for a World Without Nuclear Weapons, which was started by the Archbishops of Seattle and Santa Fe and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We have the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship involved. And then in the endorsing organizations, we have,
Mhm.
many of our coalition members, but also new organizations as well, like the Washington Marshallese Community Association, American Red Cross Northwest Region, the Buy-in Alliance. So we're really excited about this, and this list continues to grow. So that's really our turnout strategy, is to bring in these organizations to add their name to this,
Mhm.
and to turn out their members and have some representation.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and this is our tentative schedule, which is going to probably go through a few more revisions, but a lot of the things that I mentioned earlier are on this. We have some exciting performances as well. Um, and yeah, I would just say that we're excited to get this going. We are hopeful that this will be a platform to launch from, that we will inspire the attendees, and we'll agree to some form of action that we can take together to really educate our communities and rebuild the advocacy against nuclear weapons. I think I'll go ahead and yield the rest of my time for questions. And of course, if folks want to reach out to me personally or are interested in ways they can help out with the conference, my email is just sean@wpsr.org, and putting that in the chat for folks. I think I'm gonna pass it to Joanne next.
Unless, do we have any questions for Sean at this point? Yeah.
I have a question, and I think I'm muted.
I can
No,
hear
I'm
it.
not.
I can hear
Okay.
you.
I understand that part of the conference will be available over Zoom. And I wondered if you could just speak to that, which parts would be available for people who wouldn't be able to get there or to be there for the whole thing.
Yeah, we believe we can live stream the main program. So that would be the keynote speakers and the three panels we have. We won't be able to live stream the workshops, and it'll be difficult to live stream the breakout discussions and things like that. So really for the best experience, come in person.
Mhm. And then my other question is about sponsorship. As I understand, there's no fee for being a sponsor and no commitment other than please help publicity and all. But is that true? Is there any requirement? And do you want, like, for the different chapters of FOR, would it be helpful for us to be involved separately from FOR as a whole?
Yeah, so there are kind of two categories actually. So to be an endorsing organization, it is what you described. The sponsoring organizations are those that have given a financial contribution. And I think either FOR, or I might be mistaken, it's either FOR or the Tacoma FOR gave a contribution, which is why you all are listed as a sponsoring organization. As far as it is helpful for, because we are paying to fly out our speakers. It is helpful to give financial contributions for those that are able. It certainly helps us do this work more and support more people traveling to our area. And the last thing I just thinking of this, I didn't mention it, but on the 13th, we have a optional field trip that's coming together. We're hoping to bring a decent sized group out to the Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action to learn about the center and engage in some sort of demonstration at the Gates to the Bangor base. So while we have our big speakers out there, we want to make sure that they come out to the largest concentration of deployed nuclear weapons in the Western Hemisphere. So if you're planning on coming, mark your calendar for all 3 days.
Thanks. Any other questions for Sean before we hear from Joanne? So Joanne, I
And
think
if, of course, if you have questions, just jot them down and we'll get, we'll have time a little bit later.
I think Louise has her hand up.
Yeah,
Oh, yes, Louise, thank you.
sorry, I'm late in checking in. Sean, did you mention the flyer? And is there an updated version of that flyer that's available?
Yeah, so updated as in I've been adding like the organizations that have been endorsing like periodically.
Does it have all the, the date, the time, and the location
place.
on the flyer?
Yes, yes.
It should, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I want to take it around, but I wanted to make sure it was as up to date
The
as
slide
possible.
that you showed, that was a slide that Louise, I think you might have missed. Sean had
I
just
did.
Sean, you want
Oh.
to put that back on, just so that she can see it?
I could, or maybe there's a way to send it in the chat.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'll pop that up again.
Okay, great.
And Louise, I thought you were gonna ask this, but it reminded me, uh, folks in Seattle, one of the kind of requests we have is to if you're willing to put up or provide housing or a place to stay for some of our activists from out of town. We do have folks coming from Bellingham, Portland, Spokane, and potentially even farther out into like Oregon. So yeah, it can be really, really helpful for accessibility to give folks a free place to stay. So I will put a link in the chat.
Oh, and Sean, do we have a number of people who signed up so far?
I think we're at about 130.
Hmm.
That was as of Thursday, so I'd have to check that again. But I can do that and we can circle back around to it. But the the link I put in the chat is to a form you can fill out either if you want to request housing from your if you're out of town or if you're willing to provide housing to activists who are looking for a place to stay. So yeah, so folks in Seattle in particular, that's very helpful if you're willing to consider that.
And I know already we're having people coming from Atlanta, Georgia, from Philadelphia and New York. That's just to start. Okay. My name is Joanne Dufour, and I'm privileged to be able to speak with you tonight. I am with the Olympia Coalition to abolish nuclear weapons, but I also have connections now with the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship and with the Rotary and with several other groups. This is the third time I have been to the United Nations in New York. And so I bring you greetings from the United Nations in New York. I didn't have time to be able to load up all the many pictures I took. So I want you to close your eyes. And I don't know if you've ever been to New York, but right on the banks of the East River is a very beautiful white building with a tall building, was tall when it was built in 1948. And there are 195 flags flying outside. So just remember that's where you want to put yourself, because you're going to be walking through the front doors with the statue of the gun that is wound around. I don't know if you know the image of that gun, and the nozzle of the gun, there's a nut in it. And of course, that monument is right there near the entrance. It was to that place that they held for the third time. Well, it's really for the second time they've held it, but it was a meeting of the states' parties. The treaty for the abolition of nuclear weapons was authorized at the United Nations starting in 2017. By 2021, the 50 nations had signed it. It came into force on January 21st, 2022. I think I got my dates right. I might be off. What has happened since that time? Since the very first time, Vienna hosted the first meeting of all the countries that had ratified it. Why? Well, if you actually read the treaty, you'll find out that it has a whole bunch of verbs. Once you sign the treaty, you make sure that you will not ever develop, market, transport, use, threaten to use. And the verbs go on and on and on, and they're all specified for non-nuclear powers, because this treaty was really designed not that the 9 nuclear powers would ever sign on to it, because that's not going to happen automatically. But you were trying to make nuclear weapons illegal. So the appeal was made to the rest of the world that doesn't have nuclear weapons. And of course, it succeeded. Nuclear weapons are officially, authentically illegal. Okay, and we banner that every week. Okay, so that being said, since there are so many verbs, they need to bring the countries together to help them enforce. And that's the role of not only ICAN the International Coalition to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, who was the behind-the-scenes organizer of the countries who were balking at the fact that the nuclear powers hadn't disarmed the way they were supposed to, according to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So they balked enough that the ICANN saw an opportunity, and they brought them together for several meetings. And the Pope was at one of the meetings, and the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, was at another meeting, and the Secretary General was another meeting, and convinced the 126 countries of the 193 to let's go ahead and form a treaty. And that's how this all got started. So these meetings, this is the third time they're bringing together. By this time, we now have 73 countries that have ratified the treaty. We have 97 official countries, and the word was that we are going to be at the halfway mark of the world when we reach our 100th country, and that is coming very, very soon. They didn't announce which those 3 countries are going to be to bring us up to 100, but we'll have 2 landmarks by the time we get there. It'll be half the countries of the world want this treaty. That's number 1. And half the population of the world want this treaty. You know, China and India have weapons. They're not included, but the rest of the population of the world is saying, hell no, we want you to get rid of your doggone treaty, your doggone weapons. So the process of which part of the treaty applies to you is why you bring these countries together so that they could kind of talk and mesh out and see if they have similar situations, can they help each other? The progress has been absolutely marvelous. I went to last year's conference and I was overwhelmed by hearing one ambassador after another ambassador after another ambassador. Everyone's in the same page. We're all against nuclear weapons. And if you hear it repeated often enough by excited ambassadors, you really say, my God, something's really happening here. In diplomatic terms, they're not fighting each other. They're not upping each other. They're polite to each other. They're kind to each other. Not only are the ambassadors on the right page, but the 1,000 members of the civil society were there along with them. So where we have 30 members of the civil society authorizing our conference, there were 1,000 members showing up at the UN this last week, supporting the UN holding of the 3rd meeting. That alone is exciting. You know, that breadth of people, because we're now representing millions of people across the nature of the globe. This is not a small little dinky little exercise. It is growing. Let me tell you how it's growing. And I wish I had, you know, I wish I had photos I mean, I have plenty of photos. I just didn't have time to present them. So I will in the time to come. But let me tell you what's a little bit different about this treaty. Because there have been, you know, you've heard of START Treaty, you heard of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, you heard of the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. What's different about this one is because Peter Morris spoke from the International Committee of the Red Cross, and he says, why aren't you guys talking about the human beings that got affected? They never did. They talked about weapons, right? All the other treaties talked about weapons, weapons, weapons. This is the first treaty to talk about people. Which people? The indigenous people. So, Jean, when you were saying, you know, I'm not sure when we're giving, you know, the land acknowledgement that has anything to do with indigenous people, it sure does. And those voices were at the conference big time. And I mean big time. We had the Marshallese people there. Was the Marshallese seat in the trusteeship council of the government of the Marshall Islands filled with the ambassador? Well, no, because the Marshall Islands itself hasn't acknowledged the treaty yet. They're still too bound with the nuclear presence, well, the military presence that's on that island. But the indigenous of everyone from the Marshall Islands, the Christmas Islands, there were indigenous people, the Kazakhs. You know, we thought we were bad when we created 67 miserable situations for the Marshallese when we tested there. The Kazakhs had 497 tests by the Russians. And they were the ones who were chairing this meeting. And the Kazakh voices, honest to God. One woman, first of all, there was a man there he had no arms because he was deformed because of the testing. And so he, a short man, just a delightful man, became an artist. And he was a mouth artist. And they had a display of, I wish I have pictures of it. I'll show it to you when I do the PowerPoint. And he showed the pictures that he made using, the paintbrush in his mouth. And he would use his toes to mix the paint. And you should have seen the artwork that he came up with. There was also a woman who made a movie, and she told the woman's story. And this was so impactful because these are now second and third generation people that are talking. And the first thing that they would say is, well, I lost my parents and my uncle and my brothers died of cancer, and then my cousins died of cancer, and my aunt and my uncle, and they just spread the news about this cancer that keeps on coming up. Second and third and fourth generation we're talking about. We even deformed babies in the fourth generation. And that's why they're saying that women get impacted more than men because their genetic makeup has been affected, and they're delivering babies that are still suffering from the results of radiation. Is not a short-term entity. It still is around. So, okay, with that, the indigenous voices were loud and clear, very loud and very clear. And that was part of what they realized we never heard before. We also heard how great the nuclear weapons are and how they deter us from ever having war. Oh yeah, that's wrong. And how they were so great, they made sure that Japan surrendered after World War II. And they didn't surrender because of the nuclear weapons, they surrendered because Russia came into the war. We've been given this bullshit, excuse me, for 70 years now, for 80 years. And we've been expecting that, oh, well, they deter war. Oh, yes? When have they done anything to deter stopping a war? That's a lie. And we've been given that lie. And we use that lie for protecting ourselves and for building more weapons. And to recognize that it is a lie is what we are compelled to do. We who are trying to support the treaty. They want us to give out the truth. Okay? So, and the Kazakhs, oh my gosh, they chaired the meeting, and they were the most efficient people. What they did this time that I never saw them do before in the last meeting, there were a whole stipulations, I think 17 stipulations, articles in the treaty, and each article talks to something else. And it's a different to-do list. So what they were doing right now is, when they get all the countries together, they form working groups on each article, and the working group looks specifically at the article. Like one article says, really, if you have signed the treaty, you have an obligation to reach out to your neighbors in other countries and strongly encourage them to also sign the treaty. That's better known as universalization. So they have a working group on universalization. What did that group do? Talk about all the outreach that each country has tried within the countries that have already ratified it to bring a neighboring country in. And they did that with every single article, had a working group that was specifically enforcing that article. They weren't just sitting back and saying, oh, ho-hum, we signed this treaty, but okay, someday we'll enforce it, we're not going to worry about it now. That's not what was going on. I can remember last year when I went, and I'd hear the ambassadors, and I'd loved hearing all these ambassadors because they're all saying the same thing. The treaty is absolutely important, and we're so thrilled that everybody signed on, blah, 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 blah. And then they would stop talking, and they might, because they did their part, they might get up and leave the premises. Every single day I went to the trusteeship council. If I stayed till 5:30, there were 80 countries still on the floor listening to each other. The difference between last year and this year is these ambassadors said, you know what? This is damn important. This isn't just a paper treaty. We're talking about the reality here, and we want to hear what each other says. And there was that very concrete show of support within the meetings. I mean, people stayed there. The other thing that was very different, they have a whole cadre of people, honest to God. I got so excited by what we were doing because it's a microcosm of what we saw big time at the UN. We've programmed, Sean and our committee that's working on this have programmed the indigenous voices, just like you could see the movies at the UN that they produced. We're doing the smaller piece in 2 days, what the UN has spread out in a very elaborate, appropriate way this past week. Okay? So that made me so proud of being where we are and what we're doing. And whenever I'd approach people, and I was, I felt like a cheerleader, and I passed out a lot of flyers. So I was hoping that the beautiful part of it was about half the people who were present this time were people under 30 years of age. Half. So the youth were absolutely involved and articulate. They were presenting at special sessions. They knew what they were talking about. We were talking about Ira Helfand. Well, Ira Helfand is part of IPPNW. IPPNW said that there could be a contingent of 20 people that they had representatives. They were all medical students from countries around the world, from 5 countries. And the medical students were there and they were taking notes like crazy. We're just absorbing this like a sponge. And every young person you spoke with was excited about this prospect. Matter of fact, I just spoke to my godchild this afternoon. And I'm telling him all about the treaty. And he says, oh my God, right on. We're going back to Larchmont, where I am right now. And we're going to start working in our school and we're going to get a club going. That happened just this afternoon with my godchild. I mean, you could start to feel that energy because it's beginning to happen. Rotary has reported on conferences of young people getting together, groups of students getting together across schools and beginning to talk about abolishing nuclear weapons. It is happening. You don't know because we're not there. We're not exposed to that. But the good news is absolutely marvelous. Let me see if there's anything else. Okay, they did have divestment. Code Pink is talking about divestment. The good news about divestment is that there are now, let me see if I get my numbers right, 130 investing organizations, be they banks or pension funds around the world. 130 investing organizations have now divested $4.4 billion in the nuclear weapons industry. Divestment is beginning to work. What does that mean for you? Well, talk to your stockbrokers. Are you not knowing it, investing? Do you have any stocks that are stocks of companies that are, if you have Boeing stocks, for heaven's sakes, they're part of the problem. So is Raytheon. Do you realize, you might not realize it, but maybe you're part of the wrong side in this situation. But they had, but this whole divestment is increasing. They also, this time at the treaty, because they said that they care about people, one of the articles specifically says that they shall begin a trust fund to help the victims of the treaty. Now, most of the Hibakusha are dead, but the victimization, remember, is going now to the 2nd and the 3rd generation. And they have not been, nobody's been compensating for the fact that they have been affected. Now the treaty is saying that there will be a trust fund, and they're in the process of creating this trust fund. And the money of the trust fund is not going to new weapons. It is going to the victims of all the doggone things we've already detonated. And that is the first time a nuclear treaty cares about human beings. And that's the beauty of the TPNW, that really human beings. And that is a credit to the International Committee of the Red Cross, because that's exactly what the Red Cross did when they went in 3 weeks after Hiroshima and reported back. They said, my God, this is horrible. They had already heard about the bodies dripping down, their skin dripping down from the heat. They already heard about their eyes popping out of their heads. They heard these horrible stories. And by that time, 3 weeks later, those people were already dead. But they heard those stories and they saw the horror and they said this should never, ever happen again. And the Committee of the Red Cross went online as the first international organization condemning nuclear weapons. Our American Red Cross takes a neutral stand on it, but they let me teach about it. They let me teach about what the International Committee has said. And sure enough, the first person got introduced after the representative of the Secretary General was from the International Committee of the Red Cross, and she was superb. Okay. The youth presence, I already told you about the positive, okay, I think if you have any questions, I tried to give you a broad overview, but there was so much more that happened, that it was, I think you can tell I'm a little bit excited about what happened, but, I just wish you all were there in person, to be able to feel and just strike up a conversation with any one of a number of people. And they're all on the same page and they all care. And we're all charged up to make something happen when we're back home. So I don't know if you have questions for me.
You could also put questions in the chat. You can raise your hand if you have questions. And we'll try to see your hand.
But people, please be very, very proud of what Sean is undertaking. And please
Elaine.
help us spread the word, because this is something so special. People who heard, I was at an interfaith meeting. People who heard about this said, absolutely, this is wonderful. So the United Church of Christ is disseminating it. The Methodist Church is disseminating it. We've reached out to we're trying to get more faith groups to disseminate it. But the people that you spoke to definitely wanted to show up, at least in Zoom, if they couldn't come in person, because most couldn't. They paid their money to get to New York. They couldn't have money to go to Seattle.
Elaine has a question.
Okay, Elaine?
Well, it's not a question really. It's a thank you. I mean, I'm just really appreciating your enthusiasm, Joanne, and I know you've been on this topic for many years, but it's such hard work, and there's not a whole lot of good news a lot of the time. So to be so persistent, you and Sean and all the others who have committed to keeping this issue in front of us and persisting that we're going to end and overturn us having nuclear weapons. So I just commend you and want to say words of gratitude.
I'm not in this alone. I mean, you're here with me and we're together, and those 1,000 people represent more thousands of people working on this. So we're all to be commended.
Jim has a question. Jim Minista. James Minista. Let's see.
You're muted, Jim.
Yes, I know. I just took it off.
Good.
Joanne,
Yeah.
to be more specific with the meat and bones of this conference, did you happen to visit or know of one of the smaller countries who have signed the treaty? And what did they report doing in connection with their signature?
We did not hear, there was one presentation that I went to, and I have to read it because I missed it. I got their handout. They did not talk in the trusteeship council specifically on this is what we did. Over the course of the last year, we had this conference, we divested from this corporation, we're not doing business, they didn't do that kind of stuff. But it was happening, and there was one workshop that I have the report from, so Jim, I'll show you the report when I get there. And they actually did delineate countries and some of the specific reports. The heroic country is Ireland. Ireland, I can remember, said one of the first things they did is they refused to let any US airplanes carrying any missiles land at their airport, ever. Okay, well, the Irish are, airport's gonna lose business, but hey, the more important thing is if you are working with the company in doing research, you are going to be subjected to life imprisonment in Irish prisons. If you in any way personally are involved with any of the provisions of the treaty and violate that treaty, you are a lifelong victim of imprisonment. That's how serious they've taken it. So that is the arch, that's the model up there. Now, other countries are doing different steps, and as I say, I didn't read that yet, but I know that wasn't coming out in the trusteeship council. You have a lot of more political support. How good the working group, for those working groups, for some of the working groups per article, they would be telling what they were doing to support the article, but they weren't necessarily telling what they were doing within their country. Okay, but yes, that was going on.
Louise has a question.
Yes, Joanne, I attended the Promoting TPNW in Congress conference that you attended last Wednesday. And one of the arguments that Adam Smith just constantly brings up is the deterrence one. And I'm wondering if at the conference, if you will have a workshop on that particular item, because that's
Yes.
one of the biggest items, I think, against, any treaty.
There is a flyer saying 5 points against deterrence. And I had copies of the flyer. I don't know if I gave away my last flyer, but one of the NGOs, that's exactly what, deterrence is a total myth. Absolutely. Every argument they give you for deterrence, if you look at it, or if you read Ward Wilson's book, he'll tell you about the myth, and he'll give you arch reasons. His book is called It Is Possible. So that I'll look for the flyer if I can find it. I'll search for it, because there was, that kind of information is available, and you have to help people recognize that because we haven't used the weapons is because they're too clumsy, they're too dangerous, and for the wars that we've been involved in, they're totally inappropriate. So why the hell do we have them? And why the hell are we putting trillions of dollars, $7 trillion into the next decade to make more? It just doesn't make sense. We haven't used them because they are too dangerous, and we aren't going to do that degree of destruction in the wars that we've had so far. So why do we even have them at all? And that's when, because it's deterrence, because but help them to help to rephrase and question people for that argument. Yeah, Jean.
Are there things that we can do to support the treaty and to encourage the nations that have nuclear weapons to join? Or is there anything where states in the United States can
Flood
recognized?
Mr. Trump's office with support for denuclearization. Flood his office. Really,
Okay.
flood it.
Okay.
Make sure that everybody is writing letters and he gets lots of support. Yes, if you're going to earn a Nobel Peace Prize for getting rid of the nuclear weapons, well, you earned a Nobel Peace Prize. Yes, because that's what he wants.
Mhm.
And so support him on that. I mean, just because he is who he is, don't assume that you can't hold him to his task, because he always says, I'm going to do this, and then he tries to do it. Well, let him try to do that. That's a good thing. That's one thing. Look in your own, spread the word. Please bring as many people as you can to the conference. I'm hoping that we'll have a lot of Zoom proponents, because I was passing around so many flyers that I hope, and we won't know, except people have registered, because they're not going to get the link to they get the link to register, but you have to register to get the link for the Zoom, because we're not advertising the Zoom. So make sure that your church groups have it, or your religious groups have it, or your synagogues, or your mosques. Make sure that you are talking it up. We need the numbers. And we need the numbers to make sure that other people really start talking about this. And the fact that the young people are beginning to be on, they were so proud of what they were learning because they know they're learning something that their parents didn't know about. Right? And they're suddenly learning this, and because they're hearing the stories of the affected people, and these stories are horrible. They're horrible. And it's all been hushed up. Hushed up. There was a movie last night. If you want to watch a movie, one is called Silent Fallout, and I'm going to try to see if we can get a showing for for WANW, if we can get it, and I have the contact person. Silent Fallout was a whole study in the baby teeth and how they were impacted with strontium-90. And that was showing, those were because we were doing the damn tests in the Pacific. That radiation flew over the Pacific. It went over the entire course of the country. It went all the way up to Kodak, and Kodak was having problems with radiation in their films. That was because of the tests in the Pacific. That's what radiation does. And it makes you, this film gives you all these connections about, this was during the 60s and the 70s. You know, so this is going on. For heaven's sakes, when I was down in Los Alamos last summer, and I was speaking to this young woman, she was, fixing the beds. And I said, well, you're in college, what are you studying? I'm studying radiation, and we're going to be treating radiation disease. Here in New Mexico, we know that there's radiation all over. We know it's in our food, we know it's in our water. And that's the voice of a young person. And she says, the best I can do is to learn how to treat it. I mean, that's how real it is. And that's how real it is for the consciousness of young people who get it. I mean, New Mexico, they get it. Because Los Alamos has all those plutonium pits. And they're still developing the plutonium bombs down there. So, oh, and I saw John Wester. John Wester is I mean, Ira was there. All the downwinders were there. I saw John Wester. He's gonna join us. He's gonna come on Zoom for sure and join us. We're trying to get his archbishop to be our keynoter and so I mean, everybody, all the speakers, Ivana Hughes, she was there, and she committed that she is going to Zoom for us. So I mean, you know, this is a place where the most important people of the the stars, but these are really superstars because they come from all over the world.
There's another question from a person on the phone. Do you want to go on and speak your question? Hello?
Hello, this is Michael Brunson. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You spoke of your conference and wanting to get as many people as possible there.
Yeah.
I find that some of the procedures that are being used nowadays, you have to go through multiple intricate steps in order to register to participate in an online or in-person meeting, or to even learn about the actual date, time, and place, are a huge obstacle to people participating. If you really want to have the maximum number of people participating, I would suggest the maximum amount of publicity and not make people jump through multiple hoops in order to get in. If it's truly an invitational private meeting, then the multiple intricate steps may be appropriate, but if you really want to get as many people as possible there, you should dispense with that.
Thank you, but you're giving us the idea that everyone here, if you could help us publicize, if you could write a letter to, take out an ad or write a letter or announce it in any group that you're, if you could help us spread the word, that would be wonderful. And I thank you for your comment, because I think there are people that are intimidated, especially if they're not, computer savvy.
Is there another way to register? Would there be a phone number people could use to register, or?
Joanne, if I could add to that,
Absolutely.
the registration, you can actually just show up the day of. Well, we're not going to turn anybody away. The reason we're collecting registrations is just kind of so we can have a rough idea of who we need to accommodate. We have the Seattle Evergreen Korean organization, for example, is planning to feed people on the second day. So it's just a courtesy to the organizers if you're able to do it. If not, no one's going to be turned away.
Is there a way for people to ask questions? Is there, not using a computer, is there a phone number that you publicize? I didn't look for one, but I know things that WWFOR has done. We try to have a way for people to send in registration or call someone. That might be a good.
Anyone
if-
want to volunteer for that?
If folks want to just email me, I can input their registration that way. Otherwise, I would just say if you can register, do so. If you can't, it's okay. It's just we want to just have a rough idea of how many people we're going to have.
Right. Yeah.
And if you want to get some
And
phone calls,
a more substantive comment I also would have is that in the year 1994, the newly independent country of Ukraine renounced its nuclear weapons and handed all of them over
to Russia.
to other countries to be dismantled under international inspection.
Mhm.
And Ukraine at that time had more nuclear weapons than any other country in the world except for the U.S. and the Russian Federation. They had more nuclear weapons than Britain, France, and China combined. And if Ukraine is now overrun by the Russian invasion, my thought is that no country anywhere in the world will any time in the next several centuries be willing to renounce nuclear weapons, because they will say, maybe mistakenly, but they will say, look what happened to Ukraine. That's what will happen to us if we renounce our nuclear weapons. So it doesn't matter whether I like Ukraine or dislike Ukraine. I feel, as a peace activist who is against nuclear weapons, that I also need always to speak out against the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because if the Russian invasion succeeds, no country will want to renounce its nuclear weapons.
Right. I see that it's almost 7:30 and we have another presenter to hear from. Could we go on and hear from Mark,
Absolutely,
talk
please.
about what
Yeah.
Olympia has done in terms of a coalition to work against nuclear weapons?
Thank you, Jean. I'm Mark Fleming, and I'm with the Olympia Coalition to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. And I think we have about a good portion of our membership in this meeting. And we've been active since 2017. It was organized by Glenn Anderson, and we pretty much started doing this. Actually goes to the question the person had about how do we get the states, how do we get the message up to the federal government that we don't want these. And it's really by local action, building up from the bottom. So the Olympia Coalition is focused on outreach. We've tabled, particularly back before the pandemic, these days at the Arts Walk, wherever we can find other opportunities. We have a weekly banner session out on I-5 where we hold a 10-foot by 5-foot banner that says nuclear weapons are illegal. And we get very good response, both from the traffic on I-5 as well as the street traffic behind us. So by doing that, we figure we have about 3,600 cars in an hour. So people are seeing it and at least thinking about it. In addition, we've been, been really pushing to get our local governments to endorse anti-nuclear actions, such as support for the treaty on U.S. ratification of the treaty on to prohibit nuclear weapons, for the Back from the Brink campaign. We've been successful, and particularly with the Olympia city government, they've passed 2 resolutions in support of getting rid of nuclear weapons. One was more general. A second one passed, I guess, about 18 months ago, where they specifically said we want to see the United States ratify the the treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons. And that took about, that was like, I don't know, about a 5 year campaign trying to figure out how to get to them. And it took us, we wrote some letters to emails, that sort of thing, never got any response. And finally decided we're just going to go down and show up. Take that 3 minutes of public input that we have and ask them to do that. And we did that, handed them the resolution, and ultimately they passed it. So we were very happy with that result. We have had less luck with the county commission. We've asked them twice, and first time they ignored us totally. So we went back and asked them again. This time they didn't ignore us. They just said, no, this is not something we want to do. So now we're trying to figure out, well, what options do we have? But the idea is to get try to get the local officials to start badgering their members of Congress, badgering any officials that have decision-making power, saying, people in your constituency do not want this. So please take these actions. Someone mentioned the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. Again, that's something where there is a lot of support for it. So, supporting that. We've also lobbied our members of Congress. We've been pretty active on that from the get-go. We've met with Murray and Cantwell's staff here in the Tacoma office. And then we've actually had a meeting with the staff members who deal with national security issues. And what we found is they were not all that familiar with it. Actually, one was not particularly polite, not so much overtly now. So just kind of multitasking while we talked. We've also lobbied our member of Congress, Marilyn Strickland, again, talked to our local office several times, and we've also talked to their staff. So we're just going out there and saying, this is what we want. Here's who we represent. Here's why. Here's what we want to do. And the idea is this is something that has to build nationwide. So we're taking the actions here in Olympia. Trying to think of anything else that we're doing active. Joanne, you mentioned the book discussion group. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, well, WAMW has had book discussion groups, but we had our own private book discussion group first on as OCAN. We did one with Archbishop Wester's book, and then we did book discussions on Tim and Wallace's book on what is it? Avoiding the catastrophe of climate and nuclear weapons or something like that. But it was, and I have to tell you this. Do you know about Annie Jacobson's new book? Her book is called, and Annie Jacobson was there and she got some good responses. She did an outline of what her book was to all the, all the ambassadors, and she got very favorable reactions. But anyway, her book is Nuclear War, a Scenario. And what she does is do second-by-second countdowns for 72 minutes. From the first second, within seconds, they can tell a nuclear weapon has been deployed within seconds. And so she tracks that down. By 72 minutes, the world has ended, according to her book. Okay, good old Tim Wallace. Tim Wallace is a man I really like. He is coming out with a book, and it's called Nuclear Abolition, a Scenario. So as soon as his book is coming out, April 15th, we'll have a book discussion on nuclear abolition, a scenario. It's a follow-up to Annie's book.
So essentially, we're just local group in Olympia trying to do as much as we can to get the word out and also get our local officials to act. Also, last summer we hosted the Golden Rule, the Veterans for Peace anti-nuclear boat. When it came, they were here for I think a couple days and had several events. So the idea is just to make people aware of it. Most people don't want to talk about nuclear weapons because it is scary, and you really have to let them know that they do have to think about that and take action. If it scares them, then you really want to give them the tools and the information so that they can go speak to their representatives and really put the pressure from below. So I think, how many, we've got, how many cities have passed resolution, Joanne? I mean, it's like 70 some in the US and about 600 worldwide.
73, well, last time I checked, it was 73 in the United States, 867 around the world.
Yeah.
But they did have a program on the world cities. And I couldn't, there were too many workshops. I couldn't get to that one. So I'm sure the number's up since my count.
So at the conference, that'll be a good opportunity to talk about what are some local options for getting some of this movement. So I'll be looking forward to that.
Actually, Back from the Brink was the one who put on the workshop on the cities ratification. So Sean, maybe you can get that information from Back from the Brink.
The coalition in Olympia has also done presentations at churches and classes.
right.
Joanne and Glenn Anderson have done a lot of that, and Debbie Dorman, who's here, has some plans to gather former Peace Corps people and other people. I think that's the main focus, but we're looking at just different groups that we might speak to. And of course, always trying to get young people more involved. That's been difficult, but
A challenge.
yeah, it's a challenge. I think the University of Washington has some young people's organization that that focuses on abolition of nuclear weapons. It's hard for young people who have been very focused on climate to include nuclear weapons, and that's something, the intersectionality of the various difficulties in our society and world is important to bring up. And in terms of how to bring people in, that's something that we've found.
And that was one of the things that Glenn was really good at, finding a link between nuclear weapons and these other groups. You're concerned about climate change? Well, this is the ultimate climate change, and it can come very fast. You're concerned about gun violence? Well, this is the ultimate violence. And also, you mentioned one thing I left out is we put together a 4-week course on nuclear weapons nowadays that we did via Zoom for about 2 years. I think we did that.
20 sessions. We had
Yeah.
over 200 people that took the course.
And it covered everything from, the origin of nuclear weapons, how, where they came from, why, the theories that behind it, the military policies, and then some of the actions that people have taken in the past, as well as what can be done in the future. So we've done any way that we could to get the word out. We've tried, and we'll keep doing it.
Oh, can I tell you something?
Sure.
I was sitting there and this man came up to me and he said, "Joanne, I took your course." I said, "What?" Yeah, he said, I took your course. And I said, I was really inspired by what you folks were doing. And I decided I had to do something. So I walked on a 600-mile walk against nuclear weapons. And he walked from Florida up through North Carolina. I can't remember what else he did. And then that was because he took the course. I wasn't blue.
Nice to get that kind of feedback.
Yeah.
We have another question, Joshua.
Yes, I'm curious if you have an ad for the conference up on the Facebook that we can take, duplicate, and send out.
Yes, we do. If folks follow WPSR or Washington Against Nuclear Weapons on Facebook, those posts are up. I can quickly dig out a link and put it in the chat as well.
Thank you.
And we will have tables for exhibits. So if FOR wanted, and there's no charge, I mean, you bring your own materials, put them on a table and get people to sign up with FOR, right? But we also going to have a table with giveaways, free books that people could share, or free materials that people can share for other people to just take. So, but I think if you want to do, if FOR, it would be wonderful to have you as a sponsor and promote yourselves.
We have some fellowship magazines that are really, this particular edition is really good. And we have some we can bring that would be good to give out, not to sell. Question I have is about donations for the conference. What's the best way for people to give donations? Do you have a way to donate online or a place to mail checks?
Yeah, currently we're as the fiscal sponsor of the Washington Against Nuclear Weapons Coalition, the Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility is up for processing those donations. So folks can donate through our website or mail checks to WPSR and just note that either send a note to me or note in the donation that it's intended for the conference, and that'll be the way to do that. So I'll put a link to our donate page in the chat as well.
Other questions for Mark or for anybody?
No, but I think all of us want to thank you for being here. We know who you are, and we know how much you care, and we love you, and we hope that you'll continue. I hope you felt encouraged by what you learned tonight, and knowing that there are a lot of people out there that are rooting for all of us. But keep trying, please. I spoke at one point at the end of one of the sessions. I felt moved to stand up and say, if I was didn't mind borrowing a selection from my Black brothers and sisters, but please keep your eye on the prize. The prize is the TPNW. So please work to make sure that TPNW gets ratified and gets enforced.
In terms of things people can do to help, you'd mentioned, Sean, you'd mentioned housing. Are there other things that you need? You need people at the conference to direct people around, and how would they let you know if they want to do that?
Well, the idea of a phone call, if someone here would be willing to offer their phone and could tell people information about the conference, be the phone recipient. And just tell them, I got a phone call because I spread some kind of, I know the Peace Fellowship. And I got a call from Philadelphia, and a woman wanted to know, you know who's coming? Kathy Kelly is coming, if you know who Kathy Kelly is. She's coming in person. And she needs, that's something that if anybody is willing to pick her up at the airport, because she hasn't been to Seattle, pick her up at the airport, and then she wants to go to Ground Zero. If you want to host Kathy Kelly, I think she was going to put herself up she was coming with her husband, so I think she's going to stay at the hotel right near. But she doesn't drive, she said. So she needs somebody to help her get around. So if somebody wanted to pick her up at the airport, bring her to the hotel, then she can walk over to the conference, and then help get her to Ground Zero. That would be and you'll have the privilege of getting to be with Kathy Kelly for a while. For those of you who don't know, she's a Daniel Berrigan protege, and she has been against war through Vietnam with personal visits to Vietnam, and then coming back and advocating against the war, getting arrested. She and John Deere, I think, are running neck and neck as to how much time they spent in jails. She was to Afghanistan, I think, 1,000 times. And each time would report back, this is exactly what's going on with our money in Afghanistan. She's an amazing, amazing person. And just as sweet and down to earth as anything.
And there may be some other people who would really like to have a local escort, or if not a place to stay, someone to help them get to know Seattle. We also are looking at carpooling or maybe a bus from Olympia, and it would be possible to do that from other places too. It would be good to have someone who wanted to be a carpool organizer, either from your community or in general. But for conferences I've worked with, I know that that's something that the people running the conference can use help with those extra helps that really can make a difference for people coming from far away or from other parts of the state. So if anybody is interested in that, I think probably getting in touch with Sean would be the best way, or through WPSR.
Also, this is a whole other thing. If you have young people that you know, and the young people are really good candidates, I mean, they really are interested in this topic. The UN has a special youth program through the Office of Disarmament Affairs that they want to accept young people into a program where ultimately, if you get involved in maybe starting a nuclear weapon discussion group, or you get actively involved in spreading the word, the payoff for that is your own trip that they will pay through a UN budget to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so you will be connected with, the Office of Disarmament Affairs is a branch that is all about disarmament and all about nuclear weapon eradication. So they have these youth programs that they announce for the youth. But in case you know of candidates, direct them. I mean, we're talking about young people here, college-age young people. If you know of nieces or nephews or neighbors or somebody that you said, does this interest you? And contact the Office of Disarmament Affairs. And maybe maybe you can be selected for this program. They did outreach at the conference at one of the youth sessions.
Can I mention something?
Who is that people would contact, Joanne?
It's the Office of Disarmament Affairs at the
Okay,
United Nations.
okay.
They call it ODA. UNODA.
George had something to say.
Yeah, just along with Kathy Kelly, I think Susan Crane is going to be in attendance. I don't know if it's in an official capacity or she's doing a workshop, but she just got out of German prison where she served 7 months for action at a German airfield. So that's Susan Crane.
I think we would need some housing for her.
Yeah.
So
probably
she
so.
might be another person that we might,
She's a Catholic worker, so she doesn't have any money.
she doesn't have any money, so I think she would need some kind of support. And so we don't really have, we're looking at the downwinders, really. We were looking at the people most affected personally, who were the downwinders, and with the money that we have, supporting them and making sure that they are housed and that their transportation is taken. Like the downwinders from Nevada. I mean, that's one kind of example. And so we're not sure about Kathy, but if we have someone who would offer housing, that would certainly help. And picking her up at the airport, I don't know about transportation yet. Unless you want to make a donation on her behalf to her plane fare. She's coming from Catholic worker where? New York?
In the Bay Area,
Oh,
Redwood
Bay Area,
City.
that's right, California,
think-
so it wouldn't be
think-
that expensive, yeah.
I think Rodney Brunel might be helping her out. So
Okay.
Other questions, connections?
I just wanted to maybe flag a few things in the chat. I have an outreach guide that I put together that folks can go to for frequently asked questions. It also has some of our flyers in there and a message that you can copy and paste and send to organizations you're familiar with, or just send to 10 of your contacts. And the request I'd have for folks on this call is if you can share this flyer and invitation with 10 of your friends. So just email about 10 people. That would help us reach, I mean, probably like 100 people.
Anything else? We have a few more minutes if anybody has a question or comment that they'd like to share. I'm interested in knowing who's on this call. There's a number of people I recognize who are local, but if anybody else who's not local wants to introduce themselves and talk about what they do and how they might help, that would be great. Don't want to put people on the spot.
My name's Bob Delastrada. I'm Jean's husband. And we had an interesting situation. We have a friend who is very much involved in peace and justice work, but she said that she wasn't interested in nuclear weapons. And Jean and I, we kind of thought that was kind of an oxymoron. You know, how do you not be interested in nuclear weapons, given that the nuclear weapon is an equal opportunity weapon? Yeah, it doesn't discriminate. So.
Yeah, I told her nuclear weapons might be interested in you.
We had,
I'll break in with my question. How will people who aren't local be able to get the URL for that which will be shown on the internet?
we're not, well, if they can register I mean, is that the question that could be decided by the phone call? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, those who register that are out of town, will they be
Yeah.
sent the URL?
They'll be sent the Zoom link, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But we're not, the flyers aren't advertising because we really are hoping that we'll have a live participation. And so we're promoting as a live conference. But certainly in New York, I mean, I was speaking with people from around the world, right? So of course, for them, it would be Zoom. And I'm hoping that we'll have a large number of Zoom people from outside the United States.
We have a couple more questions. Marty, iPad.
This is David.
David, yeah.
Yeah, I know that the preference, strong preference is to have registration ahead of time, and that's completely understandable. Would it be possible if somebody wanted to attend and they hadn't registered, they come up the day of the conference and register?
Yeah, sure.
The only way we're going to turn people away is if the fire department makes us.
Yeah.
The church holds 300 on the sanctuary side. So we're up to 150. Look, it was just 20 more in the past 3 days, right?
700.
Is it really? Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks. That's even better. Okay, the sanctuary seating holds 300 people. So now we have almost 2 people in every pew. Hey, we're really getting there, right? But the balcony holds 700 people. So I'm thinking big, we can have, I don't mind if we have another 1,000 show up to Seattle, like they had 1,000 show up in New York. I think that would be great.
That's a wonderful venue. I've been there for years for Martin Luther King Day celebrations. And yeah, it's a wonderful venue. Dan Morgan, it's a question.
Yes, Sean mentioned me and the book club in the chat. Our book club that's sponsored by WPSR and WANW is the Nuclear Weapons Abolition Reading Room. We meet once a month. Our next meeting is 9 days from now, March 18th, Tuesday evening. And we're reading currently Nuclear Folly, A History of the Cuban Missile Crisis by a Ukrainian historian named Serhiy Ploki. That's a rough pronunciation, but he works at Harvard, and it's supposed to be the definitive history of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and gives a lot of the Russian or Soviet perspective. So anybody who knows anyone who might be interested in this, please let them know. I put
Is it an online group?
Yeah, I put my email in the chat.
Okay, good. Okay. And Louise has another
Now,
question.
you may have mentioned this also, but I heard that the parking lot associated with the church is no longer available. Is that true?
So the church rents a parking lot on Sunday. We are going to put together a logistics guide that can direct people to like nearby parking garages. But yeah, there is limited on-site parking. And we're gonna do our best to communicate that ahead of time.
And we're hoping that people who live in Olympia for the Olympia will be able to take a bus. Maybe the Tacoma people want to think of a bus. The only hitch is that Kathy Kelly would be speaking on Friday night. The organized program stops at 5 o'clock on Friday night. But for people who want to stay in town, then Kathy Kelly is going to be speaking on Friday night, starting at, I think like 7:30, so you have time for supper. And we now have a location, thanks to Sean. He found a location with some support from Seattle University. So that's a walking distance away from the church too. So it would, the logistics of people who want to leave at 5 o'clock or people who want to stay would complicate matters a little bit. But if you have a bus option, a round trip bus option, that would certainly help. Parking.
Also, for people who don't want to have to park downtown, there are park and rides, and there's a good bus system if you can find a place to park and know how to get downtown. It's pretty doable. Mary Hanson has another question. I just
want to mention that the light rail stop at on Capitol Hill, while it's a bit of a walk away, there's also a kind of a trolley that gets you within a walk of that church. Also, the Seneca stop, it's a bit of a steep uphill, but the Seneca stop for the light rail downtown is downhill from the church. So if you come by car from elsewhere and you park somewhere near a different light rail, or even if you're coming from the airport, you might want to think about putting all that somewhere into the promotional material for the conference. I don't know at this time what the parking situation is at each of the light rail stops. That's kind of beyond what I understand, but I would think, for example, the parking would be pretty free in the area around Beacon Hill. That's just one example. So I think there are ways, unfortunately, most of the light rail stops, such as the Capitol Hill one, do not have accessible, inexpensive parking very close by. Seattle is a very congested place, so one has to use a lot of creativity, but it is possible to park for free and use light rail and the trolley to get within a reasonable walk of that church.
Mary, could I ask your help? Because someone did call me from Philadelphia and wants to come, and I told her about light rail. but then I'm saying when you get off, what stop? I would say take a cab, take a taxi, if, in case you can't negotiate the bus routes or any, or trolleys or anything. What stop would be the closest if you're gonna build in a taxi to the hotel or to the church?
I wish I knew. Probably the closest one is, I think the easiest one is the Capitol Hill one,
Capitol Hill?
because
Okay.
it's flatter. The one that's downtown is hell. You know, it's right in the middle of the most dense part of downtown, the Seneca stop. So catching a ride there, you could do it, and then they would just go up the hill, go up Seneca.
Are there more
But
taxis?
unless a person is mobility impaired, I would recommend using public transportation for the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think a taxi is,
I don't know. how
or
much-
an Uber is beyond something that I understand how to use in downtown Seattle.
Bev Bassett's hand is up.